All right. Welcome back. This is episode 17 of the Feel for the Game podcast. We're going to go ahead and get started with our week 11 recap. We had a solid slate that did not disappoint like a lot of people thought would this week. Had a couple of upsets, had some really interesting stuff happen with the group of five. We're going to go ahead and get started with the group of five as our first game. Memphis taking on Tulane at Tulane. Final score 38-32. Did not expect this one to happen. I thought that Memphis was going to go and take care of business here. I believed in Brendan Lewis, and he actually played a pretty solid game, but Memphis could not protect the quarterback in this game.
No, and this just kind of began a theme for this week of just carnage all around college football. This was the first game that kind of did that. I mean, Memphis was leading for the G5 playoff spot, and now that's erased. Tulane had a great chance before last week, and then they lost. They got blown out by UTSA. So all these teams just taking each other down. Retzlaff looked really good, dominated this game. He pretty much was the main player that got them this win.
Yeah, he had 375 total yards and four touchdowns, most of that coming through the air, which we haven't seen from him all season. He played really solid. One of the biggest plays in the game was they opened up with a 65-yard touchdown to Shaz Preston, took the top off the defense, set the tone, made it pretty clear that Memphis was going to have to find a way to pressure the quarterback if they wanted to win, and the opposite ended up happening. Tulane ended up sacking Brendan Lewis six times in this game with a total of 10 tackles for loss. They lived in the backfield. I didn't see that coming. From watching Tulane this year, they have not looked like a team that's gotten good pressure on the quarterback, but they did in this game. So I was really impressed by what Tulane was able to do. Unfortunately, they've already got two losses. Only one conference loss, which came to UTSA just a couple weeks ago, and then they had the road loss to Ole Miss in a blowout. This team will probably have a chance outside at the AAC Conference Championship game. I believe that USF is still the best group of five team, even though they also have one conference loss and one non-con loss to Miami. They profile pretty similarly, but I feel like USF's just got a way better ground game at quarterback. So may see them square off in the AAC Conference Championship game here in a couple weeks. I'm looking forward to that one. I really want to see Byron Brown give this team a shot at the playoffs. But overall, it ended up being exciting towards the end. Memphis tried to pull back into this one and give themselves a chance to win. They fall up short in this one. Tulane gets the win, sets the pace for carnage this week, which we'll keep talking about as we move on with these recaps. But this is kind of what started everything. All right, the next game we've got Texas A&M goes to Missouri and pulls off a 38-17 convincing win. I finally got a score right, Landon. This is the first accurate prediction I've had on score and outcome all season. I had Texas A&M winning this game 38-17, and that is exactly what happened, which doesn't really often end up being the case when we predict these games. So, got to give myself some props for that. I felt like Texas A&M kind of did what they wanted to do in this one. Marcel Reed didn't really have to do too much, which is probably what they were hoping would be the case. When he has to do too much, sometimes he makes some poor decisions, and that puts them in a bind. But this team is just so solid with so many different playmakers that if he just plays his part and uses his athletic ability when it's time to and not forcing things, they're so hard to stop. Nobody's really done a good job of stopping them all season, maybe other than Auburn. Auburn's the only team that's really slowed them down. They still couldn't beat them. So Marcel Reed finishes 20 for 29, 221 and two touchdowns. Not a crazy stat line, but pretty solid. I was impressed with how he played. He was very poised, and the pass rush really didn't get to him in this one. Um, if anything, A&M's pass rush had some key plays, getting a strip sack. Damian Sanford in the second quarter strip sacks Matt Zollers and puts them in a position to take a two-score lead before the half. I think pretty much after that, A&M had this one in the bag. It was never really in doubt.
Yeah, I mean, with just how one-dimensional Missouri's offense was, I mean, they ran the ball okay, but they had zero passing game. Zollers was 7 for 22. You're not going to win games in the SEC with stat lines like that, especially against a top three team like A&M. And they really didn't have to do anything extra special on offense. I mean, with how good their defense was able to just shut down Missouri, it was just business as usual.
Yeah, I think the recipe in this one for A&M was just continue to get the ball to your playmakers. They've got some of the best in the country with KC Concepcion, and they've also got Mario Craver. And Ruben Owens is coming on as the lead back now that we saw Le'Veon Moss get hurt earlier in the season, which was unfortunate. But I mean, they've just been so dynamic. They get the ball to their playmakers and they don't force stuff with Marcel Reed. I mean, they can beat anybody. offensively. And that's exactly what they did. Our keys for Missouri to have a chance in this game was to get the stretch run going and play action off of that. They did not get the passing game going. They had some success running the ball, which I figured would be the case. Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts both go for over 100 yards. They still fail to score more than 17 in this one. They had their chances. I think they missed some field goals, had a couple opportunities to score and did not. Had some turnovers like the fumble we just mentioned. At the end of the day, like you said, Zollers being a freshman and going 7 for 22 with 77 passing yards against the number 3 team in the country is just absolutely not going to cut it. This team is just a couple of players away from probably competing pretty closely with A&M, but not having Bo Pribula in this one really hurt them. They have two really solid wide receivers. To not be able to get them the ball is just you don't have a chance at that point. So I was impressed with what I saw from A&M. This is their first really convincing win for me, other than the LSU game in a little while. So good to see them put this team away when they should have. They're setting up for probably one of the best seasons in program history right now, with a really solid shot to go into Austin and finish on a huge note and go 12-0. That's pretty wishful thinking considering what we usually see from A&M, but I think Mike Elko's changed the trajectory of this football program. We might see something that's never been done there this season.
Yeah, it's seeming like the Jimbo 8-4 is being washed away.
Yeah, I think Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo Fisher
Yeah,
have
Kevin Sumlin too. Yeah.
taken all that bad juju with them to other places, and I think neither of them are currently employed. So that tells you a lot. I'm really impressed with what Mike Elko's doing there. It's really incredible. So that was a great game. I enjoyed it. I wish we had gotten to watch a little bit more of it. We were at the Mississippi State Georgia game during when most of this was being played early in the first half when it was still close. So we didn't get to watch too much of it, but after watching a couple of the key plays, I thought it was pretty clear who had the best players individually, which was what we talked about in the preview. I just feel like A&M's got some of the more talented individual players in the country. And even when they don't have the most holistically sound team on certain days, their mid performance or below average performance is enough to beat really good teams like this. So, very impressive win for Texas A&M. Alabama takes on LSU at home and dominantly wins 20-9 in a low offensive output game. LSU, I really don't think ever had a chance in this game. It looked close early in the first half, but their offense was never going to give them a chance in this one.
You're not going to go into Bryant Denny and not score a touchdown and win a game.
Yeah, I think they may have had one game. I don't remember if it was in Tiger Stadium, but it was like a 9-6
The
game.
9-6. I think that there was no touchdowns in that game. I think that
Yeah,
was at Packer Stadium. And
it
then
probably
Bama got
was.
revenge on them in the Natty that year,
Yeah,
21-0.
this matchup, like you rarely see that happen, and when it does happen, it's because of two really elite defenses, and not necessarily maybe one offense being really poor. I felt like LSU's offense in this game was just unbelievably poor. They continued to do the same things they always do. I mean, they had a couple good runs with Harlan Berry, which I was hoping they would lean on that just to show me that they could be a different team for once, but they didn't. They stopped giving them the ball and they started to try and throw these check downs and these short stop routes and drag routes, all the typical stuff that LSU's been doing all season, these screens, and they just got bottled up. And Garrett Nussmeier was only averaging like 5 yards per attempt. He was 18 for 21, but he could not move the ball down the field, so they bench him. MVS goes in, or MVB, sorry, and he plays just really inconsistently. Like he shows flashes of being a really great runner, and then the offensive line can't protect him, so
Yeah, I
he
mean, it looked
panics.
like they're about to do something, and then the offensive line would fold, and he would get sacked, and then they had a strip sack at the end of the game. Just anytime they'd take a step forward, they'd take two steps back, and really just hinges on the O line and how terrible it's been.
Yeah, the O line was big. Not being able to protect the quarterback really sucked for them. And then obviously abandoning the run like they always do. Maybe that wasn't just a Brian Kelly thing. Maybe this team is just incapable of sticking to the run. I don't know, but that's just what it feels like to me after watching this. Joe Sloan, I'd be shocked if he stays employed after the season or gets kept on staff for any
He's
reason.
already gone, I thought.
I didn't know if they
Is
fired
he
him
not?
or not. I thought they kept Blake Baker and Joe Sloan on, but they may have fired him and Brian Kelly. It looked like the same offense to me, so I guess that's why I assumed he was still there. Nothing really changed to me visually watching this football game. So
He's fired. Yeah.
okay, well they may have literally just kept doing what they knew because they didn't want to try to practice for a new game plan going into Tuscaloosa. I guess they thought they gave him the best chance, but if I'm LSU, I'm doing anything but what they had been doing. So
Yeah, they should have taken a page from Auburn.
yeah, they ended up finishing with 232 total yards in this game. That's one of the lowest outputs they've had in a while. It was not great. They had a pretty poor performance against Ole Miss offensively, but they actually were able to score a touchdown in that game. Kicking 3 field goals in this one was just not going to get it done. I really liked what I saw from Alabama's wide receivers and tight ends. Josh Cuevas is starting to come on. He's had a couple big catches. Latsier Brooks, I didn't even know he was on the team until this year. I don't follow Alabama football that close to know what depth they have at receiver. All I really knew is that they had Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard, which are two really good receivers. But Latsier Brooks was healthy in this game, and he comes back. I think he had the biggest play in this game with a 53-yard catch that set them up inside the 10 for a 17-3 lead with that touchdown before the half. That's what made it pretty evident that this game was probably not going to be reachable for LSU if they couldn't find touchdowns, and they never did after that.
I'm glad we didn't go to this one with how the offenses performed in the game.
Yeah, we heavily considered it. I guess we're just now telling y'all that we have not gone to this game. We looked at the ticket prices and the nosebleeds. It just wasn't worth it. We kind of had a feeling that LSU wasn't going to be as competitive as we wanted them to be in this game for it to be worth going to. And with the amount of money we would have to pay, it just wasn't worth it. We had the one game we went to with State Georgia, which also ended up not being extremely competitive down the stretch. So I'm glad we didn't double up on uncompetitive SEC games this week.
For sure.
So that pretty much does it for Alabama versus LSU. I didn't really have any other big key takeaways here. I think Alabama probably had their worst offensive performance in the past couple weeks and still was able to win by double digits. So thoroughly impressed by this team's defensive game plan and how they played down the stretch this year. Next, we've got the Georgia game that we went to at Mississippi State. Final there was 41-21. UGA comes away with a solid win in Starkville. After that first scripted drive where State walked down there and scored, I thought to myself, I was like, if State can keep this up, they'll be competitive. But I remember watching Jeff Lebby offenses against teams like this at Ole Miss. When we were at a talent deficit, we had to score on the first drive of the game. We would always win the coin toss and elect to take the ball first. We would typically score a touchdown on a very well thought out scripted drive. When I say scripted, I don't mean like NFL scripted, like it was rigged, like it was destined to go that way. I'm saying like the offensive game plan was well thought out from watching a lot of film and they knew exactly what they were going to do because they knew what Georgia was going to come out in. Usually after the first drive, teams adapt to whatever you come out in, and you can't continue to run the same plays. These defensive coordinators in college football are too good, and they will adjust. So that's typically why you see teams like State have success. That's just the Jeff Lebby way. That's how he coaches offenses. And they come out, walk down the field, and score. And I thought to myself, surely Mississippi State will be competitive in this game if they can keep doing this. But I just remember Jeff Lebby. I was like, I just don't know that they're going to be able to keep doing this against Georgia. And sure enough, that was the best drive they had the whole day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we scored again until like late third quarter. Was it? It was 38-7 at that point. I mean, Georgia scored 38 in a row. We were just completely outmanned and out physical, and Georgia just knew exactly what they wanted to do in this game and executed it pretty much perfectly. And we've had some up and down performances, and I had a feeling going into this game that since we were coming off a win, this might be a little bit of a letdown because we had been fighting to get a win in the SEC for so long, finally get one, and then play somebody like Georgia. So I'm not super shocked at the result, but it definitely sucked. And we also had probably the best tickets that we've ever gotten at a state game before, and just had a great seats for this beatdown. Like, and this sucked.
Yeah, we got front row seats for this absolute splattering, unfortunately. I thought it would be more competitive on the front of State being able to score more points. Just I've watched Georgia's defense a lot this year after watching the Ole Miss game. Like until they really tighten up and it's time to be clutch, their defense is so easy to score on. And I just thought the State was going to be able to take the top off a little bit more. Blake Shapen got pretty much killed in this game. He ended up exiting in like I think it was the late second or early third quarter with a shoulder injury. He got hit and fumbled the ball out of bounds on I think it was like a corner blitz or something, a blind side. He got smoked, and that was pretty much the summation of their offensive outing after that first drive. Was just they couldn't protect Shapen. They couldn't be consistent running the ball. It just never really came together for them after that until Taylor started to get in garbage time and show that the run game and the escapability that he brings to the table really helps this offensive line play better. They still didn't play an incredible game offensively when he was in there, but They were able to hit some shots. I think they hit one or two deep throws, one of them to Brent Thompson, who's an absolute stud, underrated wide receiver. And they had a couple big run plays with him. He punched in 3 rushing touchdowns in this game, scoring every single touchdown for State. I think that moving towards the Egg Bowl, State has to really consider, even if Shapen ends up being healthy, that Kamario Taylor needs to be the starter.
And we have to get the offensive line healthy.
Yeah,
That
Albert
is a
Reese has been
must.
out, which is you mentioned several times has been really tough on the State offensive line. I bet he'll be back in time for the Egg Bowl. If not against Missouri, y'all will really need him. But I think it really came down to the run game that Georgia had and the offensive line play. Like the drastic difference in talent there, to me, is what blew this game
It
open.
it just really showed.
Yeah, like once Georgia got stopped a couple times and it was still like a 1 or 2 possession game. Felt like State, as long as they could find at least a field goal or a touchdown before Georgia scored again, it would continue to be competitive. Georgia just leaned on y'all with the run. Nate Frazier has an incredible game. He went for, I think I have it right in front of me. He went for 181 yards and a touchdown on only 12 carries, averaging over 15 yards a carry on his own. He played an incredible game. He had a 59-yard touchdown that pretty much put this game out of reach, and or at least it felt like it did. It wasn't technically out of reach, but I think everybody in the stadium knew that when that touchdown run got broken off, that Georgia was just going to continue to do what
Is
they
that
do.
the one to make it 31-7?
I believe so.
Yeah,
That was
that
pretty
was the
much where it was
knockout
at.
punch.
Yeah, and I really was impressed with what Georgia was able to do in the air in this game. Noah Thomas had a really nice touchdown. I mean, they've been able to kind of pick apart State with those tight ends over the seam and down the sideline. They had a couple catches. There was one we talked about right before they went up 10-7. I think it was when it was 7-3. They threw a sideline pass into the left corner by the end zone to number 10, the new tight end that I actually don't know. He had a little bit of a push off, and it didn't get called. Obviously, this didn't change the game, but if State gets a stop there, they still have the lead, whether they miss or make the field goal. So that kind of mattered a little bit at the moment, but at the end of the day, Georgia was probably going to end up winning this game because they were the more talented team. I think you've got to look at like talent wise what Georgia has on offense. Their offensive line's been average this year, but they're still better than State across the board. They're better in the trenches against State's defensive line with what they have on O line. And the tight end position is just so deep. They have like 2 or 3 tight ends that could start just about anywhere in the country. They all have great size, speed, and great hands. You just can't really do anything about that. Like when we played them, it felt like Oscar Delp and forgetting the other guy's name. I think he got injured in this game.
Luke
Lawson
Lucky or
Lucky.
Lawson Lucky.
Yeah, I mean, they were always getting open, and the wheel routes. They love the wheel routes and the seams, which is really more of a pro style approach when you run those two tight end looks, and you have those kinds of schematical advantages against linebackers and coverage. That's typically what you see from really, really well coached teams. We talked about this earlier when we were preparing for the podcast that despite the fact that Georgia may not be the best talent wise this year compared to their previous teams, they still have great talent, but their coaching staff is incredible. You've got to give credit to the coaching staff. Kirby Smart always hires good coaches. They always end up being head coaches in other places. So, testament to the team and what they're able to do, despite the fact this probably isn't even one of their best teams this decade. So, I think they're probably going to wrap up this season with only one loss and make the SEC championship game if A&M or Alabama screws up. I liked what I saw. State needs a win to make a bowl game. They've got Missouri and Ole Miss on deck. I think they win one of those games. I really do. I feel probably a little bit better about Missouri given their quarterback situation, but the Egg Bowl is always just you never know what's going to happen. So we'll be probably end up going to that game, and we'll probably have a lot of good conversation about that one moving forward. But unfortunately, Mississippi State doesn't end up being super competitive in this one, like a lot of people thought. Georgia run all over State for over 300 yards of total rushing
Mm.
offense, and I mean, I think that's about all you can really say about this game. That sums it up.
At least the alumni baseball game the night before was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that was neat. I didn't even know they did those. Apparently, Texas does that too, but State had an alumni baseball game, and it was really fun to watch. Ended up going into
Sold out the whole
extras.
stadium for it.
That's pretty cool. I don't think Ole Miss does one of those, but if they don't, they definitely should. That's really good for the baseball program. So I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I think that's pretty cool. Next game we got BYU at Texas Tech. Unfortunately, I bet on this game, and I bet on BYU. They've been proving me wrong all season. I was just tired of being on the losing side, and I said, you know what? I'm going to give the Cougs a chance and I'm going to put some money on this game. And I'm going to pick them outright on the podcast as my dog. Well, I guess we didn't do call the dogs, but if we did, they would have been my dog of the week. They were minus 10 or plus 10 and a half in this game. They come out super flat offensively in this one. They virtually did nothing the whole game. Um, the player of the game, in my opinion, was Texas Tech's field goal kicker. Stone Harrington went 5 for 5 on field goals, nailing a couple really long ones. 2 for 2 on extra points, and absolutely carried them to a victory here because the offense low-key kind of struggled against BYU's defense, which I figured they probably would struggle. It would just kind of be more on the terms of them maybe turning the ball over a couple times and getting a couple big sacks, putting them behind the chains. That's not what happened. They actually protected the quarterback relatively decent in this game. I mean, I think they might have had like 3 sacks on Baron Morton, which isn't great, but it wasn't horrible. They were able to string together a couple decent offensive drives that resulted in like 2 touchdowns, lots of field goals. BYU ended up turning over the ball 3 times in this game, getting 0 turnovers in return, finishing -3 in the turnover battle. That sums up the game to me. I think you look at this matchup before they played and you think, okay, I bet the winning team probably wins in the turnover margin for sure and is able to get pressure on the quarterback. BYU lost the turnover margin. They did get a little pressure on the quarterback, but it wasn't enough to really change this game. I thought that Caleb Douglas's touchdown early in the game, like after how BYU had been playing offensively, was kind of like, okay, BYU's got to score touchdowns. If they cannot score touchdowns in this first half, they are going to get way too far behind. And it's just, they're not going to have a chance. And that's exactly what happened. Texas Tech kept driving down the field, chewing clock and kicking field goals. Got up to 26-0 at one point.
The turnover stats were very surprising because coming into this game, Texas Tech was one of the teams that turned the ball over the most in the nation, actually. And BYU had one of the best turnover margins in the country, so that was a big surprise. And I feel like Texas Tech really proved in this game why their transfer class was like number two,
I
wasn't
think
it,
they
or
might have been number
number
two or number
one.
one. LSU might have had more, actually. I think they had more players. Texas Tech had more high profile guys, though.
But they played like the team you would expect with that kind of a transfer class in this game. I mean, they just absolutely shut down BYU's offense, and with how bad their defense was last year, just crazy they were able to transform it like this.
Yeah, I think that that absolutely had the biggest advantage in this game was Texas Tech and their defensive line, their linebacking core. They just bottled up Bear Bachmeier and company in this game, which I thought that Bear Bachmeier was probably going to play well. I've watched how Sam Levitt played against this team, and I thought to myself, well, Bear Bachmeier hasn't played a bad game really all season. I fully anticipate him to have a pretty good game if they win. And he didn't play terrible, but there just was not much open down the field. They really didn't have much time to throw. The run game never got going at all, which is a problem. LJ Martin got bottled up, and I think Texas Tech ended up being able to run the ball pretty well in this one. Cameron Dickey had like 140 total yards. He's been a solid player that came on early in the season, which I don't think anybody really saw him being the player he's been up to this point. This game did surprise me. I genuinely thought if Texas Tech won this game, it would be really close. BYU has been competitive in every single game, and they've obviously won all of them up to this point. But sometimes they start a little slow. It takes them a minute. I kept telling Landon, I'm like, they're gonna get going. Just give them a quarter, they'll get going, and it just never happened. So I'm not gonna bet on BYU again this season. Thankfully, I think I'm starting to see a trend where we get to these points with teams where we're really down on them. They prove us wrong for a little while, and it finally gets to the point where it's like, okay, we probably should start betting on this team. They're proving us wrong a lot. Or I don't want to be on the losing side of this because I want to pick them to lose. Everything in me was saying, yeah, Texas Tech probably should take care of business and win at home here. But I was thinking of every scenario possible for BYU to take this win to convince myself that it was going to happen. I thought the points were too much here, which they ended up not being the case. And this is probably the third or fourth time this season I've rode with a team solely because I've been picking against them.
It's 2 weeks in a row of Big 12 games that hosted game day with big spreads, and both of them ended up being covered.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And I think we talked about this before. Just Vegas typically, when they have spreads like this, that it almost doesn't make that much sense. There's a reason why it's the way that it is.
Vegas is smart.
Vegas, okay, I saw Lane Kiffin say something about this the other day. They were talking about, I guess it was a certain matchup, and Lane referenced how Vegas clearly, it was about the playoffs, I think, and how they rank teams. He's like, if you really want to know, you need to just ask Vegas because they're, I'd say, 8 or 9 out of 10 times going to be really close on stuff. especially outright wins and who's going to cover. So I probably should have been able to look at that and be like, okay, there's probably a reason for this. And a lot of times, dogs that are that big in games, like you're probably looking at like a 10% chance they even win outright. So I'm kind of surprised I ended up going with BYU, but I doubt I'll continue to go with them down the stretch. They do have an interesting game. I think they're playing TCU at night this week. There's a chance for upset potential there, but once again, I don't even want to pick a BYU game after this. This was so disappointing. But Texas Tech takes care of business here. Baron Morton has a pretty average performance, which I was hoping to see a little bit more from him this week if they were going to prove to be a solid playoff contender. I think they're probably going to be in. I think they'll win the Big 12 and make it in. I just don't think they got the offensive firepower to beat any of these really good teams.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they do either. But as for BYU, they're gonna have a really big game with Cincinnati coming up. Both those teams are 5-1. Them two and Texas Tech are the only teams in the Big 12 with one conference loss or less. So the winner of that game probably is going to rematch Texas Tech.
I think that's going to be really close. I'm looking forward to that. I'd like to see Texas Tech and Cincinnati play in the championship game. I'm sure Texas Tech will probably win, but it'd be really funny if Cincinnati ended up taking them down and going to the playoffs. Really crazy. But this game was not very great. I really did not enjoy watching what I was able to watch of this game. Texas Tech just really kind of chewed the clock and kicked field goals all game. So that's about all we got for this one. The last game that we're going to recap is Auburn at Vanderbilt. We actually did not preview this game last week on the podcast, but with how it played out, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it on the podcast. Vanderbilt wins in Nashville in overtime 45-38 on top of one of the best offensive games we've seen all season from both teams. I loved what I saw from Diego Pavia in this game. He threw for over, I think it was close to 370 total yards, and then he had another 115 on the ground. So he finished with about 485 total yards and 4 touchdowns. What a game. I mean,
Both quarterbacks combined nearly totaled 1,000 yards in this game.
Ashton Daniels was right behind Diego Pavia with a really solid dual threat performance. He had over 400 total yards and several touchdowns. If they'd won the game, he would have been probably one of the key players in their win for sure. Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton both went for over 100 yards. Finally getting the ball. They both had over 10 receptions. It was time for them to get the ball. And DJ Durkin said, all right, we're going to do what we haven't done all season. We're actually going to continue to throw the ball to our playmakers with a quarterback that's competent. And that's what they did. They exposed the faulty Vanderbilt secondary in this game, and it was a really fun game to watch. I'm glad we got to watch this one pretty much all the way through, mostly in the second half. The touchdown in overtime to Junior Sherrill is what locked this up for Vanderbilt. Diego Pavia has come up clutch in so many different areas of where this football team needed to pull away and win games. And this one was probably the most clutch moment he's had all season. He had a chance to put it away and give him a chance to knock in a field goal before the end of the game and not go into overtime. They actually got stuffed on a 4th-and-1 run play. I think he got tripped up on a quarterback sweep, but he ends up making up for that with a huge touchdown throw to Junior Sherrill. I mean, I can't say enough about Vanderbilt's offense. I've been so impressed. I mean, I genuinely did not think they'd be able to get this much better in a year. They were really solid last year, but this year they've been one of the best offenses in the country, running and passing the ball. Diego Pavia is quietly putting up one of the best statistical seasons we've seen from a Vanderbilt quarterback ever. And if this team wins out, he absolutely should be considered as an option for the Heisman. If not, at least to make it to New York. I've been so impressed with him. He's playing some great football. I definitely challenge some people to go look at the statistics right now of the leading quarterbacks in the Heisman race. Throw in guys like Trinidad Chambliss and Diego Pavia, who have been everything for their team, and see where they rank statistically against the Ty Simpsons, the Fernando Mendozas, and the Julian Sayans of the world right now. Overall, Vanderbilt was clearly the more talented football team here, but Auburn came to play. I was impressed with what I saw from them. I didn't think we'd see an offensive outing from them at all in this game, and they played really well.
Yeah, I was just very impressed with Auburn's offense, but I cannot believe how bad their defense was dominating this game. The defense has been the only reason that this team has any wins this year, and they were just completely absent yesterday. But I mean, they had the offense. I don't know how it flipped like that, just out of nowhere.
I think that DJ Durkin decided this was a perfect showcase opportunity for him. He's a defensive minded coach. He's the DC for Auburn, or was until he got promoted to intern. I think he saw this opportunity and said, all right, Auburn fans haven't seen offense all season. I know I've got the players. We can come up with a game plan to get them the ball. And that's what they did. Regardless of the fact that defense was not really their strong suit in this game, I think a lot of Auburn fans probably feel even better than they did before Hugh Freeze was losing games this season and they looked half decent. I think there was some optimism around Auburn after the Baylor game, but I'd probably be more optimistic after seeing what they did in this game offensively. I mean, Jackson Arnold in there winning his Baylor only threw for like 100 yards. They just had their first quarterback performance that was legitimately good in years.
When that Baylor game is more about just how stupid Baylor's defense was in that
That
game.
was horrible. And we've seen down the stretch that Baylor's not a great football team like we thought they would be. So I think you got to look at this as in a good light as an Auburn fan. I know you didn't win the game. You probably really could have had a chance. I'm just glad that they ended up trying to get the ball in their playmakers' hands when it mattered. Like in overtime, I know Cam Coleman was in double coverage on the fade on fourth down, but they still tried to get it to him. Hugh Freeze would have run some dumb crap shovel pass or something, and it would have gotten boxed. I'm telling you right now, Hugh Freeze would have done some BS and it would have gotten boxed. So I was impressed. DJ Durkin was able to come up with an offensive performance that was one of the best Auburn's had in as long as I can remember. So, really impressive stuff. Both teams played great. I think one of the biggest advantages Vanderbilt had in this game was one, Diego Pavia, and two, penalty yardage disparity. Auburn had 12 penalties for 91 yards in this game. Vanderbilt only had three for 21. The mistakes were minimal. Turnovers were far and few between. I think Vanderbilt had one fumble. Auburn had no turnovers. The penalties, I think, is what really separated this game at the end, going into overtime. Those couple of big penalties that Auburn had probably could have changed this game.
We've
So,
seen some of these teams without their head coach commit a bunch of penalties in games.
yeah, that's typically how things go. If there's anything that I've learned from this season is that never count out SEC refs to exploit teams that are undisciplined with a ton of penalties. They're not scared to throw the flags. They are trained to throw that flag as much as possible. I feel like the Arkansas State game from the previous week that we talked about, which we'll probably bring up again at the end of the season when we start talking about SEC officiating. We've seen too many times this year where these officials just take advantage of teams that are undisciplined and take every opportunity to throw flags. So that's enough about my rant for officiating. But Vanderbilt gets a huge win to stay with two losses and be in the playoff conversation, setting up for a huge game in Knoxville against Tennessee.
They're going to take care of Kentucky first.
Yeah, Kentucky's playing good football right now.
Yeah.
They just waxed Florida 38-7. We were going to talk about this game a little bit, but to be honest with you, I think Florida's just had so many players basically opt out and get injured that this team never had a chance. Kentucky's playing better football right now with Cutter Boley as the starter. It was not going to be a fair fight. In Kroger Field at Kentucky at night, Florida's just got nothing left in the tank. If they make this game competitive next week against Ole Miss, I'd be very surprised. So that about does it for our Auburn Vanderbilt recap.